Sorry for the delay. Here's another video. This one is coming directly off of the last intervals video, and we'll once again be talking about intervals. This time we'll be talking about intervals in context. So we'll be looking at how they show up in music and how in the music that we listen to, the intervals are more important than you might think, are really the generative elements that make up the whole sound of the piece at that smallest scale. So as we're going through, I've chosen songs for each interval based on a list I found online. I added some of my own, and I will talk about each one. Hopefully we can learn a little bit about all of these musics along the way as well. So this is the list I borrowed of interval songs from somewhere online. They're ones that pretty much everyone should know, that you've probably heard before, and that feature each interval prominently. So it's not just that it appears somewhere in there, but that it is kind of like this song is using this interval to its fullest extent, is really kind of based on this interval over other ones. So let's jump right in. Let's start with the minor second, because the unison is, of course, just a perfect unison. So to kind of show you a piece where a unison happens would be a somewhat silly thing to do. So let's start with the minor second. And the one that's usually referred to for the minor second is this piece. Okay, so you got the point right there at the beginning, the very low. In this case, it's E and F. So a very natural half step, just a minor second. And that starts to speed up until you end up in this kind of cacophonous sort of like a boom, boom, boom. So that was, of course, Jaws. Minor second, first one done. This will be the major second. So for the major second, the most commonly one referred to in the one here on the list is Happy Birthday. And Happy Birthday song opens with Happy Birthday to a major second there, between D and E in this case. In fact, it's interesting to note that this song was written by a kindergartner teacher from Kentucky named Mildred J. Hill. And the original was called Good Morning to All. And it was, I think it's so cute, it was for her kindergarten class. It says at the top to be sung standing. So everyone would stand up in the morning and then they would sing, Good morning to you, good morning to you, good morning, dear children, good morning to you. So this piece not only begins with a major second, good morning to, or happy birthday, but it also ends with a major second. Happy birthday to you. So it starts with a major second between scale degrees 5 and 6, and it ends with a scale degrees 2 to 1 major second, which is also in the opening. There's your 2-1 major second. And then all the way at the end, there's a major second too. Minor second, major second. Good. So the major second interval is all over this one, and maybe that's for a good reason, because it would actually be really easy for kindergartners to sing mostly major seconds and nice, smooth melodic intervals like that. Okay, going on, we have minor third coming up. The minor third is, as we'll see with minor third and major third, literally everywhere. I mean, of course, with the minor seconds and major seconds also, we looked at scales. We see how like so many melodies run in stepwise motion, what we call stepwise motion, which means all steps, either half steps or whole steps. Well, major third and minor third are super common as well, because they're also small intervals, easy for us to sing. They're consonant, and they define tonality. So when I said in previous videos, thinking of the scales, for example, major and minor scale, the root and the third were the ones that made the difference between major and minor, right? If the root to the third was minor, that was a minor third. In other words, that made the whole scale minor, even if all the other notes were like major, because that was still what we called melodic minor. Just the root and the third changed. The third gets lowered to a minor third, then you have minor. Similarly, major third makes major. So the incidences of major and minor third are going to be all over. But we'll look at some other ones too, where, because even in major, you have minor third. And even in minor, you'll have major thirds. They show up elsewhere in the scales. So not necessarily from the root of the scale to the third, but in other parts of the scale. So let's take a look. The classic lullaby song. So there is Johannes Brahms in the moon for his lullaby. This is called Wiegenlied. In German, this means cradle song or lullaby. You can see here's the piece. We've got one flat in the key signature, and then the bass is going F, 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 F. So this is telling me that this piece is probably actually in F major, because there's so many Fs going on, and then also because of the key signature, which we'll learn about very shortly. But remember that one flat, B flat, was F major. And you see all these Fs in the bottom. Right, so all of that can happen over the note F, and it does. In the bass line, you see that F holds that whole time. Simultaneously, the minor third, in this case, is between scale degrees 3 and 5, because here's F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we're in F major, which we are, and then 3 and 5 are running, between F and A, between the root and the third, as I said, is going to be major. But between the third and the fifth is minor third. There it gets up to tonic, or F. And then some stepwise motion. So there is a minor third in a really familiar lullaby. Almost exactly the same melody, actually, is Rodgers and Hammerstein's So Long Farewell from The Sound of Music. This song, So Long Farewell, Auf Wiedersehen, Goodbye. And if we just play that in the same key as the Brahms, you'll hear the similarity. Remember, the Brahms was... And then So Long Farewell is So Long Farewell of you. So you see how it goes 3, 5, 3, 5. That makes a minor third. Then down to the root. And then scales up. So minor third, major third. There you go. So there's So Long Farewell. Now, the last one I want to talk about with the minor third is actually a pretty funny occurrence, and that is something someone noticed in a blog a few years ago that actually even music theorists hadn't really picked up on or talked about, and then this person has dubbed it the Millennial Whoop. This is actually a hilariously common phenomenon in popular music of the last 10 years. And I want to show you how it's connected, because this is actually a minor third. So you might know in a lot of songs, Katy Perry songs, Taylor Swift songs, some of the biggest songs of our last decade, you'll hear these oh, it says wow, wow, it's a whoa, whoa. And it's spawned this whole series of videos. Everyone says, oh, the Millennial Whoop is why all pop music sucks. I'm not going to link to these videos, actually, because I totally disagree. I don't think this is why pop music sucks. I think this is actually something really kind of cool when this happens and it becomes the emergence of a style. These little recognizable patterns are built to stick with us. And pop music is trying to, get you to keep listening to it. We want to hear more. So as I said, this was discovered by Patrick Metzger in his blog, thepatterning.com. Got cut off there, sorry. He described it as this: the oscillation or the alternation between the fifth and the third of the scale. That's actually just what we were talking about. If we were in C major, then this 3-5 minor third is the same one from the lullaby, is the same one from So Long Farewell, but now it's in the context of the Millennial Whoop. So let's hear this.
we started from nothing. Why couldn't you know? Why couldn't you?
And yeah, so as you can hear in that compilation video, they even show the notation there. Between the fifth and the third of the scale oscillates a minor third, and this has become a very common motif in modern pop music that makes, as it said in the video, sort of makes it familiar, makes it seem like you've heard the song before, or a kind of an instant recognition. And that is what we'll learn about prioritizing or certain collections of notes or certain orderings of notes or certain motifs, like small melodic and harmonic gestures that then become emblematic of a style or recognizable, or maybe get overused and get old. I think that oscillating between the fifth and the third, having a recognizable interval pattern in your music, as I've mentioned in previous videos, having something happen, a gesture, and then having it happen again in a slightly changed way, and then again in a slightly changed way. None of this is actually new to music at all. Those are actually what make music memorable, what make it stick in our heads, having similar repeating patterns that change. In this case, this pattern is just completely made up of minor thirds, going up and going down. Scale degrees 5 and 3 in C major. Good, so that was the minor third. Moving on then. Now we have the major third, the interval with 4 half steps, and the fourth interval that we'll discuss. So the one that came on the list that I borrowed from online here, the list, it says Hot Cross Buns, okay? This is a song. Maybe some of you know it. The problem I have here is that Hot Cross Buns does not feature a major third, actually. It outlines the span of a major third. The song goes, Hot Cross Buns. This is just a common, first song on any instrument, right? So if you get, you sit down to play piano the first piano lesson, and the teacher says, play this. 3, 2, 1. Hot Cross Buns. Right, and it does span a major third. I'll use this terminology like it is a major third. In other words, that's the leap of a major third. Or if it's like this and it spans the interval of a major third, the gesture is contained within a major third, so to speak. Becomes... Okay, that's kind of neat, but this song is silly and, is for children. And if that counts, if you can do the span, why not use Prince here? Because this is one of my all-time favorite musicians, of course, and this is one of his most famous songs. So for the major third, scrap the Hot Cross Buns. Let's use Purple Rain. Okay, so because this does the same thing, actually, it spans the major third overall in the gesture. But it does so by stepping up and then actually completing the leap. This one, even better than Hot Cross Buns, actually does contain a major third if you do this little gesture. Purple rain, oh rain, purple rain. And lots of songs actually feature this major third. This kind of major third is the major third that reaches from the tonic to the third scale degree in B flat major from 1 to 3, which makes B flat major the right key for this piece. There's your major third. And coming back down, which was the same as Hot Cross Buns. As I'm playing this, I'm also hearing the similarity to David Bowie's Heroes. I think he uses exactly that same melody there. This particular major third is from the root of the scale, in this case B flat, up to the third of the scale, which cements this piece as it is in B flat major. You know, and all the chords that you hear are in B flat major. And so on and so on. One more example I want to use for the major third, because I just really love this particular song too, and I think it really illustrates major thirds and minor thirds very well. Uses them as the very basics for this whole song. So this whole song runs with this pattern of notes in the piano line of the music, thirds. In other words, the whole piano line of this song, the entire song, is running in either major thirds or minor thirds. Let's take a listen and then I'll show you what I mean. It's actually the song I played at the beginning of the video. Here is the music. If you look in the left hand, I'm playing B flat again, just like in the Prince song. And then in the right hand, I'm playing D. So even though it's all spread out, if I reduce this B flat to D into the octave, then I get a major third. And I can just play it in the octave. You know, I can play the whole thing in the octave, but it sounds so much cooler if I spread it out. Etc. So what I want you to notice this piece is if you measure up from B flat to D, do, do, you get a major third. And then if you skip one and you measure up from the next one from E flat to G, then you get a major third. So these are right here, B flat, then skip this one, then go here, that's a major third. Then skip this one, and you come back to E flat to G, that's another major third. Then skip this one, then you come back to B flat and D, and that's another major third. So we've got these two major thirds with this interval and this interval in between. So it goes, right? B flat to D, major third. C to E flat. Well, there we go. That's actually a minor third. And so this piece goes back and forth between major third, minor third, major third, minor third, major third. Then down here, minor third, major third. And what I want you to notice too is that when you're on the minor thirds, you feel like you can't end there, you're not done. You have to move on to the major third, and the major thirds act as a resting place. Moving, resting. Moving, resting. Moving, resting. And so what I want to remind you of is the notions of consonance and dissonance. In fact, we actually said that all thirds are consonant, and that's true. In general, thirds are thought of as consonant. But I also mentioned how you can have relative consonance and relative dissonance, and some intervals are more consonant than even other consonant intervals. For example, the minor third is less consonant than the major third. In this context, we are certainly made to feel like the major third is our home. And we move through minor third until we get to major third. Minor third, major third. And so on. So this piece has this kind of push and pull between minor thirds and major thirds running through the entire thing. Great. Moving on to the perfect fourth. We've got a couple things to look at for perfect fourth. There are some standard ones, and then there's one that I brought that's kind of my own contribution again. So the standard ones are Here Comes the Bride. In other words, the bridal chorus from the opera Lohengrin by Richard Wagner. And then this wedding song gets standardized and basically becomes the wedding song, you know, kind of like the happy birthday song. It's like, where do these even come from? Well, now we know. This is coming from Wagner. And that's your bridal chorus, which of course opens with the beginning gesture of a perfect fourth in the melody. Here comes the bride. In this case, it's F to B flat. There we go. So even when it goes up to the fifth, there's the fourth, here's the fifth, it comes back to the fourth. Interesting. So, like, that's the goal note. So there's your perfect fourth in your weddings. What about in Christmas time? We wish you a Merry Christmas. Okay, so this Merry Christmas song actually has two perfect fourths in a row. Let's take a look. It goes, well, not in a row because it interrupts them with scale motion. Two perfect fourths in sequence. It goes first from F to B flat, for example, then some scale, then another perfect fourth. You know, these perfect fourths you'll see oftentimes at the very opening gesture of something, because a perfect fourth is a great way to kind of announce yourself, right? Here comes the bride. We wish you a Merry Christmas. It has that kind of emphatic, like, we're about to start on the goal note of the perfect fourth. And we'll explore why this is when we get to harmony, because the perfect fourth, it's not just random that the perfect fourth is used like this at the beginning of pieces. The perfect fourth is essential in harmonic relationships, especially how the bass line moves and how melodies move at the openings of pieces. One more example of an opening piece, a piece that opens with a perfect fourth rather, is this one. You probably know, Amazing Grace. So this is a classic hymn, I guess, but with words originally by a guy, John Newton, all the way back in 1779, and then arranged by William Walker with the music from a song called New Britain. So it was the poetry of Amazing Grace was already composed, then this guy, William Walker, decides to marry it with this song, New Britain, in 1847, and then that gets passed down to us as the Amazing Grace we know today. And you hear the perfect fourth, of course. They're right at the opening again. Amazing grace, amaze, we wish, here comes the bride. There's your perfect fourth. At the very opening gesture of so many of the songs that we know and recognize is a perfect fourth. Interestingly, when William Walker took the words that John Newton had written and set them to music, he chose this song New Britain for a couple of reasons. And one reason was that opening gesture, amazing, sounded to him, he said that the music there was already sounding full of awe. So that whole gesture of amazing has some, he said, had some awe in it already. And then the word grace had grace to it, he said. He said the music fits so nicely with the words that were already written. It's not that the music was written for the words or that the words were written for the music. He just married these two things because they sounded so good together. I just like that little story. That was the perfect fourth and kind of some of the standard repertoire stuff that we've heard a million times. Let's hear kind of a more modern example, a really cool use of the perfect fourth in Sudan Archives, Come My Way. And this sounds like this.
I want to be friends. I want to be friends till time ends, yes.
So the melody that you're hearing there in the violin that she's playing is A to E, and then G to E. So that this piece actually oscillates between perfect fourth and a minor third, and makes a really nice pattern that way in the violin line. Then if we keep listening though, or a variation on something like this. What I want you to notice about that scale is 5 notes, whole, 3 half steps, whole, whole, 3 half steps. Does this remind you of a scale we've learned? It should. This is actually our A minor pentatonic. And when we first learned the scale, this is a great opportunity to review, because when we first learned the scale, we called those distances that were too big, they were bigger than a whole step, we called them 3 half steps. Well, now we know that the pentatonic scale has 3 half steps, or in other words, minor third, then a whole step, then a whole step, then a minor third, and then a whole step. So that is a pentatonic scale. Just remember that you can put those minor thirds wherever and then make different pentatonic scales. But essentially, that difference of a pattern of whole steps and minor thirds will get you a pentatonic scale, especially if you use 3 whole steps and 2 minor thirds. Back to that opening gesture we heard in the piano, A to E and G to E. That is a perfect fourth and a minor third. So that the pentatonic scale, you notice, has this perfect fourth in it. Okay, good. Okay, going on to the tritone.